skin and try by bringing hate to your disciple. So don't you be offended when Granddaddy defended. This flag I'm waving says I'm staying free. Don't tread on me, no. Don't tread on me, no.
Hello, Bloomington Normal. This is the Ryan Mack Show on Cities 92.9 and the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. 309-451-9299 is the text line. Be sure to check in today. Text in. You know, there's a lot of different ways I could have taken today's topic. A lot of things have happened this week. Not real top newsworthy. We've still got the war conflict going on in Ukraine. We still have Joe Biden stumbling on stage and unwilling to answer questions in the media. We still have Russian jets shooting down U.S. drones, so that's a situation that could escalate the war going forward. And last week, I talked about a couple things, but every week it seems like it's just nonstop in the news, and with the war, the culture, politics is divisive. There's any number of ways you can take each week. So I want to hit on this story like everybody else does, because it's kind of a big deal, but it's not a bigger deal in the sense of what's going on financially in our country. It's a bigger deal because it relates to some of the culture wars that I've discussed previously. The whole saying "go woke, go broke" has really taken life. Now let me divulge on that further. First, we had Disney, right? When all their problems, they tried to be more inclusive. They tried to be more accepting of this woke ideology, this diversity, equity, and inclusion tirade. It really is a Marxist idea that has come to light. It's really this nonsense that I don't even know how to explain it. Why the obsession with trying to make everybody hate themselves because of their skin color. It's really insane. But companies took on this ideology more so than the last few years. The progressive left has sunk in its nails to every aspect of our society and our government. It's in our schools, it's in our businesses, and our practices, and our policies. It's in our military, it's in our government. It's everywhere we look. This woke ideology, if you're white, you have to hate yourself and you have to feel guilty. If you're black, you're never going to be made to feel like you can do anything. It's always the white man that holds you back. All of that is nonsense. If you don't make it, it's because you don't make it. It's not because your skin color. You don't put in the work, you're not going to get anywhere. That's really what America's all about. The more work you put into it, the more you get out of it. Nobody is being held down because of race. This whole idea that everything is racist or sexist or misogynist, this woke ideology has to be tamed. Now you're seeing the pushback finally. Moms and dads are going to school boards. They're going to school board meetings and taking back their classrooms. Now, I have nothing wrong with teachers. It's the unions, the powerful, progressive teachers unions who think it's okay to tell your kids, if you're white, you should hate yourself. And if you're black, you'll never make it. Or if you want to be a unicorn, all you got to do is put a paper towel roll on your head and be a unicorn. If you want to be a cat, we'll put cat treats, food, and litter boxes in schools if you want to be a furry. If you want to be a woman, you can be a woman. If you want to be a man, you can be a man. You can be anything you want. And that is why we have all these problems going on in our country when it comes to this woke ideology. It's not working. It's not based in reality. It's based on feelings, and feelings only get you so far. Some days I feel like I'm 80, but that's because I have a physical job. So, but I'm really only 35. But it doesn't make me 80. You can't magically change your age. You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change who you are. You're not oppressed. You are the only person that has held you back. And that's what I wanted to end with on this first few minutes. You are the only person that holds you back. Now, for the rest of today's fun, I do want to hit on a big story from this week that I think everybody has touched on. But I want to hammer on the topic at hand. You might have heard about it. Silicon Valley Bank. It's one of the largest banks out, in Silicon Valley. It's primarily a bank that dealt with startups and I don't know how to describe it. Primarily tech startups. If somebody wanted to start an app or start some kind of small, high-risk tech setup, you could. They would give you a loan, and they would let you get set up. Well, how banking works, I'm not an expert in banking, but how banking works is that banks have to make money. So they take your money, they put it in, and then they take everybody's money, they pile it all together, and interest rates accrue. They make money off those interest rates, and then they are able to turn back and hand you a loan for whatever said thing or project or startup you want to do. If you have a business venture, you can do that. Well, this bank was a bank that was primarily for those type of ventures, venture capitalists. The problem is this bank had billions and billions of dollars that they had in assets, and they didn't exactly prioritize making money and making sure that they were with low risk when they gave out the money to those startups. And when the startups failed, they found no way to sustain itself. And when it comes to bank runs and financial collapses, we had one in 2008. Everybody remembers that. The economy shrank and it collapsed. The marketing for the housing market collapsed. The economy sank. Banks collapsed. Businesses laid off hundreds, if not millions of people. So what happened? Who let this happen? Well, in 2008, somebody by the name of Barack Obama was president. Joe Biden was vice president. Together, their policies hammered the American economy. It limited because of over-regulating, over-promising, and under-delivering. When you have the same type of policies you had in 2008 wreaking their havoc on American economy today, you're going to see the same results. Now, it's been almost 10 times worse with inflation, but it's Biden's policies that have triggered the same kind of results. Now, to this point, does it mean that every bank is liable now and they're going to start collapsing? I don't know that is going to be the case. They may just be a one-off and two-off here. I've got a couple examples of banks recently that have struggled. But it's not necessarily for all just financial reasons. So I'm going to get into that in a minute. If you're listening, this is the Ryan Mack Show on Cities 92.9, the News and Talk in Bloomington Normal. Saturdays from 2 to 3, you can catch my show. 309-451-9299 is the text line. Feel free to chime in. If you guys have more experience in the banking industry than I do, feel free to let me know what are your takes on this. Did they prioritize making money over some of the other factors? Why did Silicon Valley Bank fail? Well, I pulled some information. I pulled an article from the Daily Wire. The often criticized bank, Silicon Valley Bank, they were also one of the ones hyper and focused on woke DEI initiatives and LGBTQ plus IA activism. Weird. It's almost like there's a phrase that comes out. I said it earlier. Oh yeah, go woke, go broke. Companies that have hit on their ideology, their idolizing of this woke culture, DEI, tend to forget what their responsibilities are. So this bank is a top 20 bank, and it's relied upon for many startups, tech startups. It collapsed over the course of some 40 hours last week, and it ended with the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation closing it on Friday and naming the FDIC as the receiver in an effort to protect its clients. Now, funny, because the FDIC only limits $250,000, but Joe Biden this week come out and makes a statement. Janet Yellen also made a statement that you are all going to be made whole. Now, there are about, I can't remember what the single digits or maybe even 10 billion, 9 billion, I don't know how many $1 billion in there, and then investments are in there. But there's billions of dollars in this bank. And if you're only limited to 250,000, and Joe Biden and Janet Yellen both said you're going to be made whole, that means that goes beyond the FDIC regulation of insured deposits, which is weird because they have a habit of also changing definitions the last 2 years that we've seen of vaccines. They've changed the definition of what the vaccine is. They've changed the definition of a lot of things. The inflation was a definition changer. It seems like they're making another definition change. They're making a definition change of bailout. Because in 2008, there was also a bailout of the banking industry. But Janet Yellen came out this week and said there was going to be no federal bailout at this time. Weird. And then you have Joe Biden said you're all going to be made whole. That seems like it's going to be a bailout. I'm just saying. So, DeSantis also made a point to speak about it this week. Quote, this bank, they're so concerned with DEI and politics and all kinds of stuff. I think they really diverted them from focusing on their core mission. He's right. They have failed to have someone in charge of risk assessment for about 8 months until January of this year, while the person in charge of risk management in the UK prioritized, quote, pro-diversity initiatives while neglecting her actual role. This is according to the Daily Mail report. The bank has its pages on its website dedicated to showing off its DEI initiatives and workforce diversity. Imagine that. It went woke and it went broke. Hey, stay tuned. This is the Ryan Max Show on Cities 92.9. Welcome back to the Ryan Max Show on Cities 92.9. 309-451-9299 is the text number. Text in today. I always like reading those texts, even though some of them have been a few over the line and over the top hostile for some reason. But that's okay. I welcome those disagreement texts. That's fine. But we're talking about the bank collapses this week, and their level of wokeness ended up leading to them going under. So it's weird how that happens. So I'm discussing the fact that Silicon Valley Bank prioritizing this woke ideology, this LGBTQ initiatives, DEI responsibilities, and so much so to the fact that they only focused on these two efforts. Not risk management, not money making, but just that everybody has a chance to participate. And it ended with them going under. So, Chief Risk Officer for the SVB Bank in Europe, Africa, and Middle East describes herself as, quote, queer person of color from a working class background and organized LGBTQ initiative. During a month-long Pride campaign, the Daily Mail reported outlined. So she also implements the so-called safe space catch-ups for staffers and boasted for serving underrepresented entrepreneurs. Ouch. If you remember, I'm trying to think, last week or the week before, this was a couple weeks ago. Everything runs together sometimes. I talked about hiring on the basis of race solely would lead to a lot of problems, and I got a lot of flack for that. But I'm going to speak the truth on that. When you hire specifically just for DEI and race or sexual orientation or gender, you're going to run into problems of being underqualified and mismanaged as a company. When you hire solely for those qualifications, you don't just check a box. You hire based on qualifications and merit and skill set. That's all I was getting at. It had nothing to do with the fact that you couldn't hire somebody who met all those boxes. But that shouldn't be the first thing that an employer goes to when they go to hire somebody. You want somebody to be able to do the job efficiently and competently. We have a lot of that going on in administration right now where we don't have a lot of competence because they just check boxes and none of them can do their job. So, anyway, back to the topic at hand. So when they announced Wednesday that it was being forced to sell large amounts of securities at a loss, this raises concerns among venture capitalist firms that this is what the whole bank was started up to do. So they were all worried about their safety of the assets. So depositors rushed to withdraw money, sparking a run of the bank. Now, some experts have blamed the collapse on the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes. The Wall Street Journal noted that the hikes had caused the value of existing bonds with lower payouts to fall in value, translating to giant unrealized losses for some banks. Now, some other people have said that there's no excuse. The bank had plenty of time to prepare. President Joe Biden and other Democrats have blamed President Trump, signing a bipartisan bill that lifted some banking regulations. I'm going to get into that in a minute, too. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Sunday issued a joint statement with the Federal Reserve and the FDIC announcing a resolution that, quote, fully protects all depositors. This is what I was mentioning earlier. Regardless of the limits of the $250,000, she comes out and makes this statement that they're gonna get everybody's money back at no expense to the taxpayer. The problem is that's the load of the taxpayer's money. Because when you're going above and beyond the $250,000 insurance, that contributes to taxpayer money. The statement also noted that shareholders and certain unsecured debt holders will not be protected, and senior management has been removed. So there are some subtle things. All right, so now I want to get into that part where they blamed Trump, because it seems like every time something goes wrong for Biden and the Democrats, they latch on to this weird habit of blaming everybody else, including the last guy. Mind you, he hasn't been president for the last 2 years, and yet he is still, to this day, being blamed. I find that a little odd. I find it a little odd. But nonetheless. All right, so if you're just tuning in, this is the Ryan Mac Show on Cities 92.9. 309-451-9299 is the text number. We could go a little bit of directions today. I thought about bringing up the bank issues that happened this week. I've also got a story later on towards the end of the show that I think relates, but it's also kind of silly, stupid. One of those kinds of stories that make you spin your head and maybe puke up some pea soup along the way. It's along the lines of the same thing, that everything is racist and everything is woke. All right, so earlier we were talking about Trump being blamed. So I found a piece. It's from the Business Insider. And they put out a piece that say why Trump is being called out in the collapse. So President Trump is catching a lot of heat for this bank collapse. Now, if you remember, 2018, he signed a bipartisan bill that deregulated parts of the Frank Dodd Act. So This past Friday, the bank shuts down. Another crypto-friendly bank in New York also shut down, Signature Bank, which was another bank that the Trump organization was doing business with up until January 6th because they didn't like his efforts and thought he was Orange Man bad and trying to usurp an erection, like Chuck Schumer said. So they decided not to do business with him, and wouldn't you know, they go belly up as well this week. So after this whole mess of shutdowns, Democrats went on full blast and blamed Trump. So there were consumer protections in 2018 as a primary contributor to SVB's collapse. They just rake them over the coals. The rollback lessened scrutiny for banks with under $250 billion in assets, meaning the landmark post-financial crisis law could only be applied to a handful of big banks. Even the co-author of the Frank-Dodd Act came out and said, that's not true. This wouldn't have had anything to do with it. But here we are. We have Democrats across the board blaming President Trump anyway. So Greg Becker, he's the executive of Silicon Valley Bank, was one of the many high-powered executives who lobbied Congress to weaken the law. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren wrote on Monday in an opinion piece, 2018, she says, big banks won with support from both parties. See, both parties voted for this, but they blamed Trump anyway. He signed a law, rolling it back. Regulators, including Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, made a better situation work, letting financial institutions load up on risk. Now, you can't let this go without having Bernie Sanders have an opinion. He said in a statement that the failure of Silicon Valley Bank is a direct result of an absurd 2018 bank deregulation bill signed by Donald Trump that I strongly opposed. I tried to sound a little bit like Bernie, but it didn't work out. I don't have that thick communist socialist accent. So notably, the co-author, Barney Frank, of the bill, the original act, tells Bloomberg if this wasn't passed, we'd be seeing a lot more damages these days. But he doesn't necessarily blame Trump's rollbacks for the failures. It doesn't have any effect, he says. I don't think there was any laxity on the part of regulators in regulating the banks in that category from $50 to $250 billion. So, still, knowing this, the original co-author of the act even calls it out and saying, you know what, I don't think Trump had anything to do with it. This had to be passed. If it wasn't passed, there would have been more problems. But that doesn't stop Democrats from continuing to point the finger, as they always do, at Trump. They aren't convinced. So there's a list here why Trump's actions are getting the spotlight. Well, what really happened in 2018? Dodd-Frank Act was signed into law in 2010 after the 2008 financial crisis that sent shockwaves through the banking system, causing Washington Mutual to collapse and what is now known as the biggest U.S. bank failure. It was originally designed to protect consumers from abusive financial practices while increasing accountability in the U.S. banking system. Well, in 2018, the House passed a rollback version of Dodd-Frank by a vote of 258 to 159 in the House, and in the Senate, 17 Democrats joined Republicans to get the bill to Trump's desk. The bill raised the threshold for regulation standards from $50 billion to $250 billion, which left less than 10 big banks in the U.S. subject to stricter oversight, and allowed banks with under $250 billion in assets to escape increased scrutiny. Weird. It was a bipartisan by nature. 17 Democrats joined Republicans in the Senate. 258 to 159 in the House. They all went for it and signed it. And now, 2 years later, after a bank collapses, because they emphasize woke criteria and policies, they want to blame Trump. The same idiots that sign on to these bills previously. And there are a lot of bills that these people sign on to, and they think, yeah, it's a good idea. They come back and say, well, when it doesn't work, it's Trump's fault. Then why did you sign on to the legislation if you're going to blame Trump when it doesn't work? Was it by design? Who knows? But they are at fault just as much if they're going to blame Trump for this. This has nothing to do with the rollback. It's endless. Now, Paul Ryan, who was then Speaker of the House, so it was a small step toward freeing our economy from overregulation. I agree with him. But still, Democrats weren't happy. Pelosi said at the time that it was a bad bill under the guise of helping community banks. Senator Warren, her colleagues reject the bill, warned that her colleagues should reject the bill, saying before the House votes, the Congress has done favors for big banks. So we still have this fallout in which they're constantly berating Trump. Now, see, it's unclear what the regulators might do next, but Democrat Katie Porter wants to ensure that nothing like this can ever happen again. So she wrote in an email that she's writing legislation to reverse the 2018 law, saying that Congress in a bipartisan vote caved to Wall Street. I don't think that's actually what happened there, but okay. Who knows? Hey, if you're just tuning in, this is the Ryan Mac Show on Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. 309-451-9299 is the text line. Feel free to chime in. We're talking about the bank failure and this whole woke DEI stuff with it. Stay tuned after the break. Welcome back to the Ryan Mac Show on Cities 92.9. 309-451-9299. That's 309-451-9299 is the text line. Feel free to text in today. We're talking all things bank failures and the woke DEI prioritization that caused them to not focus on what they're primarily supposed to be focused on, making money and sustaining long-term success. Silicon Valley Bank collapsed this week after billions of dollars in assets had to be seized because they were losing money. Everybody was pulling their money. They were afraid of losing it, so they pulled it. Joe Biden and Janet Yellen both have said this week that everybody's going to be protected. There's a few that won't, but we all know that his buddies that were in the tech world and people who invested also are going to be set free from that. So we've been talking about the prioritization of the wokeness, and their collapses really didn't have anything to do with the fact that they just economically couldn't sustain. It was the fact that they prioritized woke over making money. Now, we have some other news here with this story. Chuck Schumer and Democrats are in a rush to give back donations from Silicon Valley Bank's CEO. Schumer got $5,800 from the bank's former CEO. Democrats on Capitol Hill rushed to donate or return their donations they received from SVB after its dramatic collapse last week. Good timing. This is from Fox Business, by the way. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer gave back a total of $8,500 to charity on Tuesday after receiving the sum in donations from SVB Bank and its former CEO. Becker had donated $5,800 to Schumer's campaign in 2021, and the bank's PAC had offered up to $2,700 in 2015. Schumer's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Imagine that. Or did it detail which charities the funds had been sent to? Now, meanwhile, Maxine Waters, Crazy Maxine, also plans to return donations she received from the PAC. The SVB's political arm gave Waters $2,500 in late 2020. Weird. She said, "Yes, I'll send it back," she told Politico Tuesday. Federal regulators seized control over SVB Friday after the bank collapsed. President Biden has assured Americans they should feel confident in the banking system on Monday. His administration will make sure and has guaranteed that SVB's depositors will have full access to their funds. He has said that this is going to cost taxpayers $0. When was the last time he said $0 for taxpayers and ended up being a lie? Just about any time he opens his mouth on that. Quote, no losses will be borne by the taxpayers, he emphasized. Instead, the money will come from the fees that banks paid in the deposit insurance fund. Because the actions of our regulators have already taken, every American should feel confident their deposits will be there and if they need them. Okay, Joe. He says this administration will soon fire all the bank's leaderships, including Becker, who donated to funds to Schumer. So there you have it. Democrats are in a tizzy fit over donations. It's kind of crazy how that happens. So this whole thing continues to go off the rocker for Democrats. But is it a sign of things to come? That I don't know. Because is it just a economic outlook? Is it the wokeness? Is it the economy? I mean, why are these big banks collapsing? And it's really something to think about. And I've been talking about it this week. I've been thinking about how I'm going to structure talking about it this week. And it just boggles my mind because I don't know if we are in a repeat of 2008 or not. But it just seems awfully familiar with everything going on that it seems we're headed for a repeat. Now, the Biden and Obama, when they hammered the economy in 2008, they've destroyed and unleashed everything. They overregulated everything, made everything too expensive to do, and the same things are happening again. You know, you can't afford eggs, you can't afford to put gas in your car, you can't afford to heat your home, you can't do anything. Groceries are too expensive. Everything we have had the last 2 years has gone up. Housing has gone completely in the dump. You can get a decent sized house, but the interest rate, because of the inflation, is gonna cause you about 7% interest. That's how crazy this administration has gone with their policies. Now, is it all in the efforts to save Americans in the long run? No. He says that, but we know full well that this is about saving money for anybody. This is about control. How can the Biden and Democrats control every aspect of your life? Well, one way to do it is to make sure that you have no money. When you have no money, you become dependent upon the government. That's one way of doing it. Now, these might just be a little of a drip. They may sit there and say, oh no, we're not bailing out these banks. And then come later, they change the definition. Oh yeah, we're going to make sure that you have more than $250,000 in your bank when it comes due. So it's things like that you have to look out for. When they say they're not going to do something, generally about 5 minutes later they end up doing it and then just stay silent on the actual action that they've taken. And don't answer questions. They never answer any questions when constructively posed with, hey, why did you just do this? I don't know. I thought it was a good idea now. But 10 minutes ago you said it wasn't. Yeah, I know. I changed my mind. That's what the Democrats do. They say one thing and then completely do the opposite. The economy is great. It's on fire. We all hate each other. MAGA Republicans are terrible. Okay, no, we just love our country and we want you to stop destroying it. We want you to stop dividing everybody. The president-in-chief is supposed to be chief unity. He has been more divisive than even Obama. And this wokeness, this woke ideology I've talked about before, I've hammered it before, the racial hiring, the prioritization of race in every aspect of our society has become a virus almost as destructive as the government's response to COVID-19. That's a whole nother bag of worms that we can get into. It wasn't that the virus wasn't a real thing. It was that the government's response to said pandemic that was the real destructive nature. Government, everything the government touches, it destroys. Stay out of the way, and you'll have a more prosperous nation. The government's primary responsibilities to promote welfare, the general security of a nation, military. There's only a few limited aspects that the government should be doing to make sure its citizens are safe and to have a powerful military to do so. Outside of that, there really is no role for the government. And today's government has been so intrusive that we're becoming a nation that we no longer recognize as a result. It blows my mind the level of incompetence that goes on in this administration and the progressive left. As I said earlier in the beginning of the show, if you're just tuning in, this is the Ryan Mac Show on Cities 92.9. Text in 309-451-9299. We've been talking about this wokeness. When everything goes woke, it goes broke. You know why? Because it doesn't work. Who cares if you're black? Who cares if you're gay? Who cares if you're straight? Who cares if you're white? If you can't do or perform a job that you're hired to do, you shouldn't be working there. And it doesn't have anything to do with your skin color. It doesn't have anything to do with your race. It doesn't have anything to do with who you sleep with. It matters your character. Can you show up on time? Can you show up and actually be a part of the team? Can you show up and do the job? If you're not skilled in a said career, there's entry-level positions for that. They can help you do those things. But this whole idea that we should be hiring people based on how they look and not how they work is ridiculous. And this whole gender affirmation and this white versus black, it needs to stop. This country wasn't built on the idea that we're all racist and we're all terrible and systemically we're just the worst. This country was built on the fact that we were all made equal. Now, that does not say equity. It says equal. Every man is equal. Joe, you know the thing, right? We were all created equal. There's no better way to put it. When we stop hammering home this woke ideology in our country, a lot of things will change for the better. You can hire 50 black people to be in your company. I'm all for diversity. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with having a diverse workforce. But like I said last week and a couple weeks ago, it should be organically done. If you're going to hire a diverse group of individuals, it should be diverse not just on race or gender. It should be diverse and as in their makeup of skills that are required for the company that needs to operate. That's what it takes to run a diverse company. You can be the most diverse company in the world and hire every color and known to man and every gender you think there is. If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. It breaks. Stay tuned. This is the Ryan Mac Show on Cities 92.9. Hello, Bloomington Normal. Welcome back to the Ryan Mac Show on Cities 92.9. The news and talk of Bloomington Normal. We're going to wrap up this last part of the show with a crazy article that I came across and read, and I rolled my eyes. I couldn't shake my head fast enough at the idea of this. But if you're just tuning in and the last part of the show, we have been talking about this woke ideology that seems to be infiltrating the entire country, and it heavily infiltrated a couple of these big banks. And Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, not primarily because they went woke, but they prioritize, how can I say this? They prioritized the woke agenda and trying to be diversity, equity, inclusive crap. They shoved that down everybody else's throats, and they made that their priority versus risk management. If startups were all of DEI satisfied paperwork and they had no idea that they had to make money, the bank couldn't make money on them They took the risk anyway. It's that kind of thing that leads to poorly managed companies. When you hire or lend to check a box, it's no different than hiring. What I said a couple weeks ago, if you just check a box for your company, for a bank, as clients, generally you're not going to get very far. Now, I'm not saying some of these tech startups had bad ideas. They probably had great ideas. But when you only lend to cover the basis of DEI and this woke, anti-family, anti-traditional system of you can do whatever you want, you can be whatever you want. Yeah, you want to make that rubber pencil? You can make a rubber pencil. That's fine. I'll give you $10 million for it. I'm going to make $12 million, right? Okay, that's fine. Well, what happened? They only cared about the color of their skin. They only cared about what gender they were going to be that week. That's what the only things they cared about. And it led to poorly managed banking. It went under. Now, what is it? Some of it economically related? Sure, probably. But more than likely, it was because they had an overemphasis on checking boxes and not risk management as a bank is supposed to. All right. So that's what we talked about today. We went around the Signature Bank, who used to bank with Trump organization and lend money out to all of his family and friends and whatever. They went under this week. Silicon Valley Bank went under. They're a giant tech company, bank, entrepreneur, venture capitalist market. And Dave Ramsey came out. I heard something from Dave Ramsey this week too, that he said, don't worry about your bank. It's fine. It's a completely different kind of bank that was having a problem in Silicon Valley Bank. So he makes this statement about that. So that's just what I've heard. All right, I promised you I would get into a story that has been absolutely bonkers, and it sums up this woke ideology to a T. It's spring cleaning time. This article I found on Daily Wire also. Is your organized pantry causing you to feel racist or sexist? It's probably because it is, says a Loyola College professor. Your pantry is racist and sexist. A viral video emerged where users share their well-organized fridge and pantry, but Loyola University professor isn't having it. She dubbed it, quote, pantry porn, glamorizing and stylizing home organization. She said that the trend is similar to the desire for niceness, which is rooted in racism and sexism. In today's culture, a place for everything in a place, everything in its place isn't just a mantra, it's big business. Nowhere is this more evident than a kitchen pantry, she writes. As someone who studies digital consumer culture, I have noticed an uptick in glamorized, stylized, and fully stocked pantries on TikTok and Instagram, giving rise to a content genre I dub pantry porn. She writes how pantries emerged as a status symbol in the 1800s, and then became more of the middle-class homes in the 20th century, before becoming ubiquitous in modern times. She then says modern celebrity culture has been made the pantry a status symbol once again, while social media influencers have stepped up and to bring the status symbol back to the masses. Furthermore, pantry porn stems from the early social media phenomenon, food porn. Hey, I like good food. I eat that a lot. Highly glamorizes pictures of cooking and eating food. Having established the pantry as a status symbol, storing spices in coordinated glass jars and color-coordinated dozens of sprinkles containers that may seem trivial. But tidiness is tangled up with status. Messiness is loaded up with assumptions about personal responsibility and respectability. Cleanliness has historically been used as a cultural gatekeeping mechanism to reinforce status distinctions. Based on vague understanding of niceness. Nice people, nice yards, nice neighborhoods make for nice houses. She sounds fun to meet. What lies beneath the surface of this anti-messiness, pro-niceness stance is history of classist, racist, and sexual social structures. So she's saying if you have a nice place and you make it nice for your hard work and a pantry and a nice house, you're racist and sexist and classist for having it. You should have messy pantries. Shame on you for having organized pantries so you can see where your food is. In her research, influencers who introduce pantry porn are predominantly white women who demonstrate what it looks like to maintain a nice home by creating a new status symbol, the perfectly fully organized stocked pantry. I don't know about you, but it's not just a white thing. A lot of people, regardless of color, regardless of sexual preference, have nice, organized homes. That has nothing to do with the color of their skin or who they sleep with. She also claims the trend reinforces sexist tropes. Domestic housewife is a feminine ideal. Magazines with Good Housekeeping were once the brokers of idolized domestic work. Now, online pantry porn sets the aspirational standard for becoming an ideal mom, ideal wife, and ideal woman. This grew out of a shift toward an intensive mothering ideology that equates being a good mom with intensive, labor-intensive, financially expensive work care. Oh, for the love of God, she needs to drink some water. All of those bins and baskets serve a purpose for what you need when you need it, but the social pressure to curate a perfect pantry might make some women work overtime. You know what? God forbid you actually want to keep a nice house clean in an organized pantry. I don't care who you are, black, white, Asian, straight, gay, whatever. If you like clutter, you belong on an episode of TLC show Hoarders. I'm sorry, but that's not a racist idea to want to have a clean house. That's just me. I don't know. Hey guys, check me out next week, 2 to 3 on Saturdays on Cities 92.9.